What was going on in you during this time? Was it something was driving you?
Yes.
What do you feel was driving you?
I think I was being led towards tasting some very, very sweet and lovely fruits with some very profound and extraordinary teachers. And I think my psyche was being drawn to those. Jung talks about synchronicity, that when we're ready, and when the student is ready, the teacher appears, is one of the sayings as well. I think a lot of my teachers appeared in a place of readiness, and not just in physical form, but also for me, Hermann Hesse was one of the most extraordinary teachers. His writings crystallized the learning experience for me. So when I read a book like Narcissus and Goldmund, which is the story, I don't know if you know Narcissus and Goldmund, Hermann Hesse's book. It's the story of two young monks in a monastery. And one of the monks, Narcissus, stays in the monastery and devotes himself to a life of holiness and spends his whole life in a place of exploring meditation, prayer, good deeds. Goldmund, who's this young, beautiful young man, escapes one day and finds a woman, goes off, and then cuts a swathe of robbery, plague, violence, murder, a whole raft of things until he's in his late middle age, and he's brought before the abbot of a monastery and sentenced to be hung. And he's sent someone for absolution, and the man he's sent for absolution is Narcissus, who recognises his old friend, pleads for his life, and makes some deal to get Goldmund's life. And they go back to the monastery together, and they spend their last few years together. And what Narcissus recognises from all of his exploration through holiness and through prayer, through meditation, was that actually the path of experience, the path of really putting yourself through everything and finally arriving back in the place of an awakenedness, had far more relevance for him. And Hermann Hesse twists these stories very often. The Glass Bead Game, Siddhartha, Steppenwolf, all of these stories are brilliant exposés of the human condition. So he's been a great teacher, although I never met him, and I'm sad I never met him because his writings inspired me enormously. Although when I read his biography, there was an ordinary man who was suffering but who had access to something. And I think something extraordinary is happening in our age. I think there's a woman called Elizabeth Gilbert who wrote a book called Eat, Pray, Love. I don't know if you've come across that.
Nope.
But it became a multi-bestseller. Millions of copies sold. And she's done something on YouTube on genius. And what she said is, in the 20th century, a lot of people were proclaimed as geniuses and either killed themselves, committed suicide, or killed themselves through excess, through drugs, drink, or whatever, because they couldn't live up to that. And what I'm starting to realise, and what I started to realise with a lot of the teachings that I had, is that genius comes through us. If we're on track with who we are and doing what we're meant to be doing, we are geniuses in that moment. But if we become the genius, that's when we start to destroy ourselves, because we can't contain it. So in the work I do these days, I'm a psychotherapist and have been practicing that for over 30 years. I'm actually practicing bringing through something. I'm out the way. I'm overshadowed. When I'm doing that work, especially in groups, it's not always one-to-one, but in groups, something in me finds the inspiration to do whatever piece of work needs to be done with that person. And I could say, and I have done in my more ignorant days, I'm a genius. But actually what I now understand is that there is an energy that's available to all of us when we're in tune with what it is we're meant to be doing, which allows us to be so much more profound than who we are.
No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Tell us about relationships, because we were left with a relationship with the you saw them for 3 months, then you ran off, and then you had the stalker. And how's relationships developed over the years?
That's been a very interesting path, because I've written 2 books on relationships, The Courage to Love and Falling in Love, Staying in Love, and I'm working on a 3rd book at the moment, which is called The Infinite Heart: Relationships in the 21st Century. And relationships have been a major learning for me. It's like we think we go to teachers. Ram Dass called relationships the yoga of the West. And they really are. In fact, Ram Dass also said something very interesting. He said when he starts to believe what people say about him, i.e. that he's an enlightened being, he's a fantastically wise person, he said all he needs to do is get into a relationship for 6 months. And relationships are our great teacher. So I went through relationship after relationship thinking I was with all these wrong women, until I went into therapy and then started to realise that they couldn't all have been wrong, and that actually there was something in me that was drawing to me something that was really unhealthy. And relationships have been my journey, and they've been very much, I work a lot with couples They've been very much my journey. They've been my journey of discovery. And I had awful relationships. When I went into therapy, I started to understand what it was in me that created it. And bit by bit, I've been able to shape those relationships. So I've been able to I understood the skills. I understood the skills from a very early stage, but understanding something and living something is a very different ballgame.
So what did you understand about what created the difficulty in the relationships?
Well, I understand that one needs to be able to express true emotions. I understand that one needs to be able to trust another in relationships. I understand that that you need to be interested in another. I understood what were the components of a good relationship. However, the components of a good relationship have nothing to do with living a good relationship. And that has to spring from something within. And it's only in the last few years that I feel like I've had some real grace in terms of being able to have the sort of relationships that I want to have, the sort of love that I'd want to have within a relationship. And again, there's something for me of service, that actually if we serve another in relationships, then there's some beauty in that. But very often we go into relationships initially saying, they've got something I want, and we want what we can get from the relationship. And of course, sometimes you have great sex in that place, but then the relationship, after a while, starts to fall apart. As we get a bit more evolved, then we go into a relationship thinking, well, I've got something I can give, and I've got something I can receive, and we're in that place where we're negotiating our ground. And very often, what happens with those relationships is those relationships start to become good friendships, but the passion goes out of the relationship. And for me, the third stage of relationship, which is what I'm exploring now, is that when we truly want to serve another, when we truly go, your joy is my joy, I'm happy giving what I can give in this relationship without looking at what I can get back. First of all, not only do you get it back without negotiating for it, but secondly, we start to feel happy and healthy within relationships. And so for me, relationships have been an incredible learning ground, as much a teacher for me as all of the great sort of souls that I've had the privilege of working with. Every one of those relationships has been a learning gift as well.
You didn't mention love. Presumably, isn't love the foundation of a lasting relationship?
Well,
basically?
it's interesting because you've got to take a look at the word love, and the Japanese, I think, have 42 words for love. You know, we have this word love that we use very blindingly. You know, I've fallen in love with you. Now, what does that mean? What I see that love means in most instances is a temporary lifting of critical faculties. That's love.
Hang on. A temporary
Lifting of critical faculties.
Okay, explain that.
Okay, so when you fall in love with someone, you go, oh, my God, this person's so beautiful, they're so perfect, they're so amazing. And they look at you and they go, wow, what an extraordinary person. You go, this is it, I'm in love. And very often couples come to me and say, well, I used to be in love with him or her, but I'm not in love. I love them, but I'm not in love anymore. Of course we're not. Being in love is like going to the Garden of Eden. It's like going to this place where we're suddenly given this sort of the most fantastic gift. We get a look at what relationships might look like. But actually, for me, love is a verb now. It's not something that happens to you. It's something we do. And I don't really know what love is anymore. And I don't mean that because I'm cynical, and and it's not a Prince Charles moment with saying about Princess Diana, well, whatever that means, whatever love means. I'm saying, actually, I'm exploring the nature of love, but I'm exploring the nature of love in much more than the one-to-one relationship. I'm exploring the nature of love in my life. With every person I meet, in every situation, there's an opportunity to bring love to that situation. And if we bring it to our intimate relationships, then we bring joy, we bring service, we bring the potential to rise above the everyday humdrum that we live in. So for me, that's love, and I'm not there yet. And I don't think many people are either.